You're listening to She's Got Drive podcast, the podcast that inspires women to be a driver in their own lives through the life and stories of Black women with drive. And I'm your host, Shirley McAlpine. I'm a business consultant, an executive coach, and a leadership facilitator, working with people and organizations to live their lives by design and not default. Welcome to She's Got Drive, what's been driving me this week, where I share with you what's the main thing that's occupying my time, my mind, my energy, and my spirit. And I share with you what I'm doing about it, the strategies that I'm using, the thing that's guiding me in all parts of my life, or the thing that might be inspiring me. Listen, even the thing that's driving me crazy and what I'm doing about it. So if you want to find out how I am taking on changing my own life and transforming my life, then you're in the right place. I know that it's been a while, or as you say in the US, my Black people them say it's been a minute since I've been posting regularly, and I think I put an episode out a couple of weeks ago. There was a few gaps before that, to the point that someone actually contacted me to ask me, am I still posting my podcast? Am I still doing it? And so I wanted to share with you this episode, and I've called it Grant Yourself Grace, because these times are extraordinary. You know, it has had a huge impact in so many ways. And so this episode is to kind of share with you some of that impact, and in like the positive side and the negative side, if you like, the things that are challenging it. I think it's going to speak more to the things that are challenging rather than the things that are not challenging, where the bright moments are in this moment. But I wanted to share it with you, and in the hope that in sharing this with you, that you can apply it to yourself, your own life, and see whether you need to grant yourself some grace too. So it's really interesting, because before I even started recording this, you know, I made some notes and that, but as I start speaking to it, I feel very emotional. So let's see how this goes, So I think, you know, of course, the pandemic has been huge, and it's had a huge impact on our lives. Our lives has, in terms of, for me and my family, our lives have shrunk in terms of like how our movements, you can really, no one needs to put a track on our movements, because I can tell you exactly where we've been. You know, it's not been that far and it's not been that frequent. So I can tell you who we've been with since March, the date we were there. You know, it's been like that, so limited, which has been the antithesis really of our life, say this time last year, you know, or should we even just say January? We don't even need to go back far. Beginning of February, don't go back far, how our life has changed, and as it is for everyone. And then when you add on the race awakening, when you add on the murder of George Floyd and all that, the protests and all that's come out of it, then, and knowing that as it happened was really heavy, is this time to really be with the impact of that. So one of the things for me that fell away, that I had to stop doing, and I don't think it was even a conscious thing, because it was like, it's to stop recording the podcast for a few weeks, and it was, I don't think it wasn't conscious. I didn't go, right, that's one thing that's going to drop, because I had every intention every week of putting something out, and then when I looked at all that I had to do and the energy that I had to work on it, there just wasn't any resource left to pull together an episode that I would think is worthy of putting out, you know. So, and that's where I start to grant myself some grace. After a while, I was making myself wrong for it. I'm like, you got to get it out. You didn't again this week. And then I was like, Shirley, grant yourself some grace. Grant yourself some grace. It became, you know, it's like a mini mantra. You know, so one of the responses to the race awakening was designing a masterclass, as you know, called Time to Elevate. You know, some ads have been on this show for white allies, and working with my good friend Ray Fisher on that. And in 6 weeks, we put out 4 part 1 masterclasses, and 2 we designed and put out a part 1 masterclass, a part 2 masterclass. So we've run that six masterclasses in 6 weeks, having designed them, having delivered them, having marketed them, having done, there's pre-work and there's post-work, and having all those conversations, hours of conversations around race. I mean, you can imagine the conversations that we're having in our design, the conversations, the research that I'm doing as well, to stay on top of what's the current conversations that people are having. As well, I'm interested in that anyway, and bringing my experience, our experience to the table. And then the many conversations with clients and potential clients around race. And race is a heavy subject, you know, and so it's exhausting. And as I realize how exhausting it is, you have to grant yourself some grace for what you get to accomplish and what you don't. I want to speak to what's been inspiring in this for me is the conversations that I'm having about race, and the nature of the conversations that I'm having, and how white people are engaging in this conversation in the masterclass and in my life in a totally different way to how they have before. I mean, I'm having conversations about race with people who I've known for years, who have not been willing or interested in having conversations around race. So that is a silver lining, my people, for me in this. You know, I do believe that I'm being called to do this work. You know, I've been doing it for a long time. We go back 34 years to when I first did my piece of work on equality. You know, I was young, but let's go back 34 years. And I remember being at university. This might be a long podcast. I remember being at university, and with my good friend Diane, we put together a conference called I Came From a Woman. I came from a woman, to remind everyone that that's our roots. Like, you were birthed by a woman, and so can we respect women? Can we? And it was about domestic violence. In fact, it was about how do you engage men as well as women in the conversation for ending domestic violence. So that's what it was about. That it sort of came from a woman. It was about violence against women, and that was a digression. I hadn't planned to say that, but there we are. This is a moment where having conversations around race in a different way. I'm not saying that everyone is engaging in those conversations around race, but certainly the people coming to the masterclass, and it leaves me inspired, because our conversation around race is about action. Our conversation is like education as fuel for action, and people are taking action in different ways that are more thinking about sustainable, long-term, impactful, and the things that impact the lives of Black and brown people. So that's what we speak about, actions that actually impact the lives of Black and brown people. Can they be doing those things? Or we request that's where they put their focus and their energy in terms of their action. Okay, so that's the Time to Elevate masterclass, and that has added a huge amount of work to which was unplanned, but I do feel like I'm being called to that work, so I'm answering the call. And so when I drop things like the podcast, then I grant myself some grace, and that wasn't the only thing that got dropped, of course. But I want to speak to something else as well around the race conversation as a mother. I want to speak to, when you're looking at race and racism through the lens of being a mother, it is like so much harder than looking at it through the lens of a colleague, because it's really It's really about how you have a, an essential conversation with your children around race because of who they are. And for those of you who don't know, my children are mixed race. And so the complexity for them is finding their place in the world, understanding the dynamics of race, understanding how the world receives them, and that race and racism is an experience that they have to navigate for the rest of their life. Which makes me, which literally breaks my heart. Which literally breaks my heart. It really should be something that no parent should have to have a conversation with their children about. And as much as, you take the approach that you take as a parent, mine has been, how long can I protect them from this conversation for as long as possible? And then you have to do it. And then what it does to you as a mother, as you navigate these conversations, and it's not a one-off conversation, it's going to be a continuous conversation. And so in those moments, I have to grant myself some grace there too. Like, did I do it right? Have I doing it right? Have I left it too late to share this bit and that bit? Am I ahead of it? Did I give too much? Have I scared them? And it doesn't mean that I'm not present to what I have, and it doesn't mean that I'm not present to all the things that I have. But love in your life doesn't mean that you can't be overwhelmed by it sometimes. And in these times, it's overwhelming. I have appreciated Michelle Obama's admission that she's been experiencing some kind of low-grade depression, because how can you not really, how can you not be impacted by these times? And so whilst I've been giving and enlivened and knowing that I'm making a difference, knowing that this is my work, as well as supporting Black women, as well as supporting, elevating the work of Black women and shining a light on their greatness is also my work. But, how do I work on both sides to shift the environments in which these Black women get to show up in so that they get fully seen, so that's kind of my work. And so the more you create, the more there is. And whilst you can expand and grow, right? And which has happened, we've had to pivot, I've had to expand, I've had to grow, I've had to challenge myself. I still have to grant myself some grace when I don't meet the standard that I've set for myself. So grant yourself some grace, Shirley. Grant yourself some grace. I think you're starting to get the space, this mixed space that I've been sitting in is one of on the one side, achievement, where work is moving forward and you're doing good work and you're getting great feedback about the difference it's making. And there's you're expanding your community and all of that stuff. And then, the beauty of of spending so much time with my children because of COVID, I appreciate that so much. And at the same time, there's this whole space and heaviness around race and around racism and around the systemic oppression. And all that does, the weight of that and all that it does. And the thing is the never ending notion of it and the impact that does on the sadness and the sometimes moments of despair that brings. And particularly when I'm having to have those conversations with my children and thinking creatively about how do I educate and how do we, myself and Dan, educate the kids about what it is. They understand that in this country 52 years prior to now, it was illegal for their parents to even have a relationship. And so understanding how the system operates, and the structures that are in place to deny the ability for Black people to flourish and fulfill their potential, and the impact of that. So that has me get really sad sometimes. That has me get really frustrated. And in those moments, I still have to just like, Shirley, grant yourself some grace. Because I make myself, I'm like, come on, get yourself together. No, grant yourself some grace. So I'm like trying to get on I joined everyone else in trying to get myself on a diet that works for me, trying to do an alkaline diet. I've done it before. I can't get myself back, I can't get myself back. Keep eating these home-baked goods that we keep doing, which is part of like the family activity. And then there are times when I'm like, you did it again. Another week's gone past. And it's just like, you have to grant yourself some grace. So, I keep sharing this with you to say there are different aspects of our lives. And when things aren't going the way that we want it to go, when it's not panning out the way that we want it, when we are present to the weight of our experiences and what's happening in the world, we have to grant ourselves some grace. 2020 is a beast. It's put down some serious challenges for us like never before. So, and with the more challenges also comes opportunities. I grant you that, but the energy that it's taking to manage ourselves in 2020 is immense. The energy that it takes to deal with race and racism and what it is to be Black is a lot, as we figure out what it means to us individually and collectively. And also to understand that we are grieving like on so many levels. We're in a pandemic which is killing people. We are present to the loss through race and racism. And what else keeps coming up for me is my parents and their experiences in their lives of racism and the impact that they had on them and on us as a family as we grew up. So it's like all of those things are present. And when all of those things are present, the things that are in the now, the things that are in the past, and as we look to the future, you have to grant yourself some grace. We have to grant ourselves some grace. I have to grant myself some grace, because when I do that, I can give space to myself. I can be present to loving myself. I can give care to myself. And I'm more likely to be in a space of peace. So if it felt like a long ramble, I'm sorry. But that's me re-entering, sharing with you where I've been, what I've been up to, and I invite you, if you found yourself in feeling stuck and, grant yourself some grace. So that's what's been driving me. And ask yourself what's been driving you this week. And maybe your response this week is to grant yourself some grace. I hope that you've been inspired to shift gears in your own life. Please get in contact with me at Shirley McAlpine on my Instagram, or you can go to shirleymcalpine.com/contact me from my website. You can also get in contact with me from my Facebook page, Shirley McAlpine, or this Facebook page, She's Got Drive. Join the She's Got Drive community. As of next month, I'll start to be doing some lives in there regularly that are on kind of different development, taking things from my courses and putting them in the lives each week. She's Got Drive is produced by Cassandra Voltalina. The music is by the awesome or female band Blonde. The song is called Circles. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, go well and stay well.